Hello and welcome to another episode of the Doom Time podcast, the minicast series where we have a look at different types of topics, but primarily books I've read and books that I want to summarize with the quote that I have written out over the course of actually reading the book. Today's video was actually inspired by a friend of mine who just recently had a bit of a revelation. He realized that he has a problem with his ego, and I decided to speed up his process by spoiling him this beautiful book titled Ego is the Enemy from Ryan Holiday. This is a book that I actually did not enjoy. I did not enjoy reading it nearly as much as I thought I would. And it wasn't because, yes, you're trying to clear your ego and you're reading a book on ego. One would assume that would be difficult to read because it goes against what you're trying to do. It's similar to saying you want to fix your addiction. Reading a book on how to fix an addiction isn't going to be a very pleasant read. Rather, it's probably going to be frustrating. No, it was a frustrating read because this book, as many books written by Americans, are basing in these books stories that are based in America. And this can create a bit of a problem for us Europeans or for people from Asia or Africa or Australia to relate to what's actually going on. These stories of pilgrims and generals from different types of sources can be difficult to attain. So here, just opening a random page mentions the Super Bowl. I have no idea of anything regarding the Super Bowl. I can quantify it and explain it in, the Champions League for football, but it's something that I don't really have a concept for. Regardless, what I have for you in front is only 19 quotes. This will be one of the shortest episodes of the minicast series ever, because this book was read in April of last year, April 2023, and I hadn't yet at the time began to diligently put out quotes from the books that I read, which was a bit of a mistake, but regardless, it's part of the process. And I believe that doing action today is far more important than actually waiting for things to happen. So, how could I wrap this or summarize this book up? In essence, Ego is the Enemy is a very stoically written book. It contains a lot of various different stories from different parts of history, not all American. There is quite a few European examples in here, if not else from Roman generals. And it uses the examples of these people that did certain things, very much ego-driven, that led them to either success or ultimately colossal failure. And it's brilliant to read because it's shocking in its process. As you read, you realize that, oh, this is going to be amazing, this person's going to be so successful, they're doing so well, they're on top of their game, and then everything is lost almost overnight because of some sort of egocentric thinking, behavior, or action. And I want to jump straight into it by actually reading the very first quote that I have here in my 19 quotes. It says, "Pain strengthens, pleasure weakens." This is such a powerful quote because it's the truth. The truth is that throughout mankind, the idea of going through pain was the process of actually creating some type of progress. Humans have become inadvertently not lazy, but complacent in the idea that life is beautiful and life should be bountiful and we can get everything in abundance. And pain has become this thing which we're almost taught to go against. It's bad. Right? Pain is perceived as a bad thing, as a bad feeling, as a bad experience. Therefore, I think we have, over the past couple of generations, started to teach our minds that pain is bad. And if something is painful, it just should not be happening. And what we've created is we're creating this level of cushioning on our children. I'm from a generation which was very much cushioned, very much sort of wrapped in these soft cloths that would prevent me from being injured, that would prevent me from, straight up eating dirt, doing things that kids are supposed to do in the process of learning. The classic case here, and I think everybody always uses this example because it's just so relatable, is a hot stove. When you're a little kid, everybody who's listening to this has been in this position where they went to the hot stove, they put their little tiny child fingers on top of it and got themselves burnt. And guess what? That's the pain, and you never got that mistake made ever again. We have this expression in our country. We say a donkey will only go onto the ice once, right? knowing that we learn from the mistakes that we make. And I think pain is a beautiful process of actually learning that. But what about the pleasure, right? It says pleasure weakens. And if I analyze my own life, right, I'm not going to try to be here reflective and judge on everybody and tell you how you're living your life incorrectly. But knowing from myself, from my life, I take in a lot of pleasure. And pleasure is hard to quantify. It's hard to put into facts because everybody is subjectively experiencing pleasure in different ways. But we're pleasuring ourselves all the time. I mean, just taking the privilege of scrolling social media or watching a YouTube video and going on a binge series, for me, that does constitute pleasure. Because the way I think of it is, again, and this is something I spoke about in the last episode of the minicast when I was reading the Quran, is the ancestors that I had, my grandfather, for example, he did not have this abundance. He does not have this opportunity to do it, to just sit there and not work his ass off and not be in pain constantly in order to strengthen his own life and in order to give opportunity and bountifulness for things to go. So I think it's really tantamount that we understand pain strengthens, pleasure weakens. This is fact of life. And I love hearing, I believe it's Jocko Wilkins, Jocko Willig is the guy. He has this wonderful speech that you can find on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and type in Jocko, right? That's Jocko, good. And this beautiful speech where every time he hears the word problem, he responds to it, good. And this man has such a powerful, powerful message that I think can very easily also be related to this quote here, right? Pain strengthens, pleasure weakens. And I think every man and woman and child needs to understand that pain is not inherently bad. It's a process that we feel in order to strengthen ourselves. And when we go onto the journey of taking in too much pleasure, that's usually the detrimental part. And in this book, beautifully explained through a lot of different stories, which, of course, I'm not going to spoil because I actually don't remember them. That's part of the process of reading a book. Unfortunately, if you don't have these quotes, you won't remember them. So again, whilst this book might contain a lot of beautiful stories, part of the reason why I take these quotes out, part of the reason why I'm creating this podcast is because most of you have read a lot of books and most of you have forgotten all about them because our brain is not made for storing information. It's only made for obtaining information. You must sweep the floor every day, every minute, and then sweep again. Let me read that again. You must sweep the floor every minute of every day and then sweep again. Of course, yeah, this could relate to dust, right? I have a task in my phone, in my Google Tasks. For every Wednesday, it says vacuum clean your room. It just says that, and it will pop up in the morning at 9 and just go, dude, this week, this has to be done. A task for sweeping the floor, or in this case, vacuum cleaning it. A bit more of a pleasurable task. I really would not want to actually be sweeping it. But regardless of the actual act, it's the fact that dust comes back. No matter how many times, I could vacuum clean my room every day for a month and then go on a vacation trip and come back and it's still going to be dusty. And this is exactly what's happening to our minds, to our muscles, to our mind. We forget, right? This is constantly happening to everyone that lives. Every action that we perform, we get rusty. In my English courses, which I teach, I put the emphasis on action, on using the language rather than just observing or listening. It's about you always putting in the effort. 5 minutes today, 5 minutes tomorrow. It works the same for working out, right? You may not have a lot of time, but just do 5 push-ups today and you'll do 5 push-ups tomorrow. And over the course of a month, that will generate a tremendous amount of push-ups. And sweeping the floor every minute of every day means that you constantly have to be honing in on that skill. And you realize later is that if you're not doing this, somebody else is. Looking at it from a competitive standpoint, now I was never a professional athlete. The closest I ever got, I guess we could argue, was esports when playing video games, which looking back at now, I don't really even qualify as real sports, but that's a topic for a different video. I had to practice all the time. The reason I was so good in a video game is because I was dedicating countless hours each and every day. Right? I was sweeping the floor all the time. And I want you to understand this mentality and this mental switch. And it was a beautiful one that I received from this book. It's just that it never ends. It's a never-ending process of embetterment, of practice, of diligently repeating the same task over and over again. And I think acknowledging this is also part of getting over your ego, because what our ego would rather see, and this relates to, of course, the fact that pain strengthens and pleasure weakens, is we would just love to be the best. I would love to just say I'm the best in, playing that video game, and then never have to actually practice again. Now, rest assured, having put so many hours into War Thunder in this case, I am still very good. I'm sure that if I opened up the game today and played for a couple of hours, I would, quite quickly get back the feeling. It's like riding a bike. But to become one of the best again would be a tremendous challenge. And for that, I would have to sweep the floor every minute of every day. If you cannot reasonably hope for a favorable extrication, do not plunge deeper. Have the courage to make a full stop. When I was reading this, and immediately, just reading this, I know why I took out this quote and why I wrote it down, is what we tend to do, humans. This is so it's so funny to me, actually. It's sad, is that we are, in theory, right, the smartest beings on this planet. We have all this beautiful ability of thought, and we've created and innovated majestic things. We've created aeroplanes that fly. We come up with wonderful ideas. We make movies. We act. We record music. We make festivals. All of these things, But what we utterly suck at is understanding when we are going in too deep, right? It's the moments when we are entering some sort of scene in this movie of ours that we're living, and we just almost ignorantly refuse to acknowledge that we are already neck deep in shit, and yet we continue going. And this is where I think the contradictory terminology comes in, where people will say, if you're going through hell, keep on going. I love that phrase. That's a beautiful quote, but it doesn't work here, because this is realizing when the battle is lost, right? I always imagine the general going into battle, leading in thousands upon thousands of soldiers, and having to acknowledge that the battle may have been lost, and he forfeiting that battle, deciding that he's going to just lose and wave the white flag and retreat. The process of forfeiting that may very well save the war. Remember, a war is just a bunch of different battles, and losing a battle does not mean losing a war. But again, it's boiling down to that ego, because the ego within you, if you're like me, if you're competitive, if you always want to win, you want to be the best, then this is a huge problem. Because what's happening is your brain is saying, I don't want to forfeit, I don't want to lose, I don't want to be abandoned. Let me tell you a little story, briefly. And this is the story about the friend of mine who is now beginning to read this book. And I visited him about a month ago, and they just moved into a new apartment, and there was a beautiful chessboard there. And I was like, let's play a couple of games. So we sat down the chessboard, and I started playing with black pieces, and this was my first chess game with this friend. Now, chess means a lot to me, right? Chess is something that I used to communicate with my grandfather. Chess is something that I have utter amount of respect for. It's not something I practice on the daily. But what I find interesting about chess is because chess is a game of ego. It's a game of your mind and inner ego and character against mine. It's beautifully crafted to showcase what the other person is like. When you play chess against someone for the first time, you're going to be meeting this person in ways that you could have never imagined. And so when I played this friend of mine, I deliberately made a massive amount of blunders. In fact, I made a colossal blunder right at the very beginning of the match, and I gave him an opportunity to give me a checkmate immediately. And he took it, of course. He saw the opportunity, and I could see how his facial features had changed the moment he realized that he had me, that he had beaten me. And he made the move, and his reaction was just ecstatic. He was like, yeah, I've beaten you, you know. And I was there sitting very calmly. And the reason I was there sitting very calmly is because I knew that this was his ego surfacing. This was his true self. He was actually showing me a weakness right there and then. What ended up happening is we flipped the board over. I now open the game with white pieces, and I destroy him. And in the process of doing that, I got to saw the other part of his ego, which was the sore loser type, right? You know, there's a lot of people that you've probably played board games with people like this, where they're great fun when they're winning, but as soon as they start losing, they become bitter people. They become very frustrated, very annoyed. Now, this friend wasn't like that, but I could see that he was being very humiliated in a way, right? He felt his ego was starting to take a huge amount of beating. He had a very, high, because he defeated me in just a couple of moves, and now suddenly he's on the complete other end of the spectrum. And this, I think, is a classic case of ego in people. You'll see that, and this is a great observation to make for yourself. I had this same problem. I remember when I was still very, very high on my energy levels of playing video games, and I was very good in that video game, in War Thunder. I remember having this fluctuation all the time as well. Being really excited, really like boastful and happy and energized, and then the very next moment I was humiliated because somebody had defeated me. And it was beautiful for me seeing this in this friend, because it was, to me, it was an obvious sign that he does have an ego problem. And the thing that he did, and I have to commend him for this, is he acknowledged it. And this was a wonderful thing that he did, because so many people, they are unable to acknowledge their own ego. They're unable to understand that there's no reasonably favorable hope for extrication. Rather, they will just plunge deeper. You have to have the courage to make a full stop. I think this speaks volumes to me. Most of the time, we speak of courage as something that is done by plunging deeper, right? Most people would imagine that the thing to do is to go through the hell that you're in. But here, it's rather the opposite. It's understanding that you need to have the courage to make the full stop. I think that's beautifully, beautifully said. So yeah, I fully commend my friend, and I hope that he has a bad time reading this book, because he should. If you have a very good time reading this book, something is wrong, I think. This should be a hard book to read, because it's cleansing you of something that, as the title of the book says, is your biggest enemy. Sometimes, because we can't face what is being said, what's being done, we do the unthinkable in response to the unbearable. We escalate this ego in its purest and most toxic form. This is exactly what I was just talking about. So we put ourselves in a situation, or rather we find ourselves in situations where we're faced with the truth that we cannot handle, right? It's unthinkable, the feeling is unbearable, and we escalate it. This is the frantic moment where, imagine you're in a pilot's cockpit. You're the pilot, you're flying your plane, and this moment comes where something goes wrong. And your reaction is, instead of calmly taking a step down, acknowledging the scenario, taking out the flight, manual and finding a checklist, instead what you start to do is you start to just frantically click and press and switch all the possible buttons you can find, in hopes that one of them will magically make everything better. And yeah, I'm gonna say this goes back to chess. If you're ever playing chess with someone, if you're playing board games with someone who cannot handle the idea of losing, that is their toxic form of ego coming out. It's a beautiful show, a painful one, but I think what I'm trying to portray here as a message is that if you find yourself in these situations, when you see this happen in people, don't think less of them, don't attack them or demeanor them. try to understand that this is them, their body, their mind, almost screeching out for help. So if you have a friend like that, maybe sending them this book would be a good gift for their birthday. Next one is a bit interesting. It says, you will make money in one of two ways. You will make rich people famous, and you will make famous people rich. Again, something that I wouldn't expect finding in a book about ego, and yet as somebody who is into entrepreneurship, who is interested in making various types of businesses or selling products online, in this case, digital products, I find this very, very interesting. You will make rich people famous, and you will make famous people rich. I actually want to leave most of the interpretation here to the listener or the reader, but it's the simplest way of looking at it, right? If there's somebody who is famous and you're able to make them rich, that will make you money. And if you find somebody who's already rich and you have a way to make them famous, which will in turn make them even more money, then that will also make you money. Beautiful. Again, one of the gems of reading books is that even when you're reading a book that's on self-improvement, for example, you may very well find financial advice. And a quote like that is a quote that I think is wonderful to remember for all times. Speaking of money, you get rich by taking large amounts of risk with small amounts of money. And you stay rich by taking small amounts of risk with large amounts of money. Again, beautifully related back to money is, I think, also has a lot to do with ego. You know, we want to make, and this is popular nowadays, it's get rich quick. I mean, one of the reasons why crypto is so very popular is because it does allow people, and it has allowed people, and it will continue to allow people who have no financial education whatsoever, in fact, no experience financial-wise, to make large sums of money. And this is brilliant. Look, I fully support it. If you have, or if you will make money quickly by using crypto, I can only congratulate you. But chances are, when you lose that money, you're going to have a very similar reaction to the one that my friend had when he was defeated in the chess match. As the island of our knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. This is beautifully written and very simple to explain. Those of you who are gamers, you've probably played a video game similar to, for example, RuneScape. RuneScape, for those of you who don't know, is a video game where you play this character which has to level up a bunch of different skills. Woodcutting, fishing, fire making, cooking, attack, strength, ranged, farming, you name it. Every skill you start with level 1 and you have to make your way up to level 99. And as, of course, you progress, it gets harder and harder. Now, in the video game, the only thing that's holding you back from reaching 99 in all these skills is time, and in some cases you need to invest some money, right? Because some skills are more expensive to train. It's very similar to in life, except that in life, no one who's ever been born ever is going to be able to reach 99 in all skills. We have to make sacrifices. I'll give you a great example here. I have recently gained a lot of weight because I've been doing a lot of working out. I went from 70 kilos to 90 kilos. And yet what this meant is that I've sacrificed a lot of my performance when riding bicycles, because to ride bicycles, you have to be skinny fit, I apologize. You have to just be lightweight. My optimal performance for riding a mountain bike or riding a road bike is like 70 to 75 kilos. I'm essentially 15 kilos overboard. What does this have to do with the island of our knowledge and the shore of our ignorance? Is that when we start learning something and we start putting all of our energy and time and effort into it, everything else in our lives starts to sort of crumble. And everybody knows this. You know, when I read this, I thought, oh yeah, it makes sense, right? But we don't think about it enough. Is we are all very knowledgeable, and at the same time, we're all very ignorant. And it's beautiful to have this understanding that when you're building this island, right, and you're assembling things in the middle, and the mountains are growing, and the buildings or whatever it is that you're building on this island, that shoreline is also getting very, very big. And the amount of susceptible damage, and, you know, if this was one of those, I keep getting these video game recommendations for Android games. when I'm scrolling on Instagram and they're like, build your own empire, whatever it is, these strategy games on your phone. Yeah, like the bigger your empire gets, the harder it is for you to also control all the borders. This is classically also a thing that's explained in this book, because there's a lot of stories of generals and people who led armies or grew large countries, or should I say monopolies of congruent land that was being taken over. It's very difficult to then also keep everything in charge. If you have a very large empire like the Roman Empire, then it's very difficult to keep it all in touch, because it's just that very massive. Remember, when you're not practicing, someone somewhere is. And when you meet them, they will win. This goes back to sweeping the floor, right? The dust is accumulating. You're sweeping every other day. Your opponent, whom you haven't met yet, whom you don't know exists, is sweeping twice a day. When you meet that person, you will lose. And the only thing I'll say here, and I learned this ironically through playing chess, is the following. For my ego, for my pleasure, right, as pleasure weakens, it would be in my best interest to always play chess against people who are worse than me, right? So I can dominate them, so I can always win, so I can show them how superior I am, how amazing I am. But if I want to learn, if I want to grow, if I want to prosper, then I have to play people who are stronger than me. And chess was beautiful, and I'll tell you another story here. This happened 2 years ago on New Year's Eve. I was hanging out with my girlfriend at the time, and I got a phone call from a friend. And he said, he lives just a couple of blocks down the road. He said, hey, would you like to come over for a couple of drinks? There's a friend coming, and I haven't seen this friend since primary school. I literally had not seen him for over 10 years. And I got there, and I was a little bit tipsy. I think he was sober at the time. We were playing, and I was like, dude, I want to play a game of chess with you. Because I hadn't seen this guy in 10 years. I kind of know him. I know what kind of a person he was like in primary school, but I wanted to meet his ego. I was just excited to meet his true mind, because I know he's a very, very smart individual. And we set down the chessboard and we start playing, and within the first 5 moves, I knew that I had lost. And I was fine with that. In fact, what happened was that as we were playing, progressively, I started sort of moving along the side of the board to his side. I think at the end of the game, we were both sitting next to each other, playing against me. Like both of us were playing against me. And what I realized in that moment was that it was beautiful seeing that I was enjoying losing this game of chess. But the way that I was losing is I was looking at all the possible combinations. I was thinking, what's his thought process? How is his mind and his ego engaging on this battlefield? And it was beautiful. And it was one of the most incredible games of chess I ever had. And I lost, and I knew I was going to lose from the very first couple of moves, and yet it was pleasurable. Whereas if this happened many years ago, I probably would have been very salty. I would have been annoyed. I would have perhaps even attacked him, verbally, by calling him names and trying to belittle him in ways. It's beautiful to see that your ego is on a journey of healing. The only relationship between work and chatter is that one kills the other. Beautifully said, right? This is what I said back in the last episode regarding abundance, is that abundance distracts you. And so when you're doing work, you should be doing work. And when you're chatting, you should just be chatting. So don't multitask. Don't do 2 things at the same time. This one's going to hurt a lot of you. In fact, this one's going to hurt me, because I've been guilty of this many, many times. In fact, I'm still guilty of this to this very day. You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. Simple as that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build that. I'm going to achieve this. No. Go out there and do it, and then come back and show me. Right? You cannot build a reputation on what you're going to do, because then the reputation you're building is a reputation of you're a go-getter. I learned this from Spitfly. This was an episode that I recorded last year with him. Spitfire he's a YouTuber as well. He also, I met him through War Thunder. He was doing a lot of editing for me, and he's from Australia, and he said he absolutely hates the go-getters, right? I'm gonna do it, gonna do that, gonna do this. It's beautiful. I can say right now, I'm gonna do this, right? I'm gonna make the most incredible, thing, podcast, whatever. In the process of saying that, I'm satisfying my ego, because my ego starts to imagine, it's already done, it's already accomplished, it feels so nice. It's actually doing the pleasure. It's imagining how nice things would be, rather than actually going and doing the thing that you want to do. So don't think you can build a reputation on what you're going to do. Even the smallest, even the tallest mountains have animals that, when they stand on them, are higher than the mountain. This is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful one, which I can actually imagine. It's if you take a very, very large mountain, then you imagine a goat just, casually going up. When that goat stands on top of the mountain, the goat is actually taller than the mountain. So I think what this quote was really standing for is that there's always something bigger than you. No matter how big the mountain is that you're going to build, it's what's the idea behind it, what's the thing that stands there. I think that's the thing that's always going to be greater and higher. And if we relate this to religion, which was what I spoke about in the last episode, then we could also say that's what's present there. Is that there's always a creature, a thing, an entity that is greater than anything we could ever build. Those who have subdued their ego understand that it doesn't degrade you when others treat you poorly. It degrades them. This is... maybe I've learned about 40% of that and implemented it, but my God, that is powerful, right? Understand that when you completely detach your ego, people who will have hateful things to say about you, it won't impact you in the slightest. This is also what I said when I read in the Quran. I said, is he who creates the same as he who does not create? That's the way I look at it. One of the big problems that many people have is maybe you also want to record a podcast. Maybe you also want to record videos or content or create something, anything. Anything you will ever create will be judged by people. Chances are it's being judged by people who are treating you poorly because they themselves, their ego, is not allowing them to get over and actually do the actions. They're the go-getters. They're the ones trying to build a reputation on what they're going to do. Meanwhile, you're in the process of just doing that, of just going through the action, sucking it up to pain in order to strengthen yourself, whilst they are enjoying the pleasure. Because frankly, commenting something negative on a video is simple, very, very simple. But it won't build you a very, very good reputation or work ethic or discipline. It sure as hell won't bring you very far. An education cannot be hacked. There are no shortcuts beside hacking it every single day. Simply put, I don't think I need to explain that. It's the same as sweeping the floor. You just have to do it. The person who clears the path ultimately controls its direction, just as the canvas shapes the painting. If I can sum that one up in one word, it's manifestation. Many of you may have been able to hear this. There's also, I believe, a wonderful short speech given by Jim Carrey, where he says that he absolutely believes that we are the creators, the makers of our destiny in one way. The canvas shapes the painting. Look, I'll be honest here. I think the idea of manifestation sounds like mumbo-jumbo bullshit to a lot of people. And if you're one of those people to whom mumbo-jumbo bullshit of manifestation just makes sense, it could be that you're a very, very pessimistic type of person. And I say this with all my heart because I used to be among you. I used to be just like you. I would open up Instagram and see these pages with motivational quotes and think, it's like, who the hell needs that? Like, ironically, me. I needed that. Like, more than I would have dared to admit. And I think it had to do with my ego, because my ego wouldn't dare acknowledge the fact that I don't yet know everything about the world, that I'm not yet the person that I would want to be, or perhaps ever will be, of course, if we understand that it takes sweeping the floor and that education can't be hacked, there's no shortcuts, then this is a never-ending journey. It's a continuous process of just going and pushing. But I wanted to share this with you because as of the last couple of months, I've been able to really, through discipline and through a little bit of hard thinking, a little bit of pain maybe, decide what my canvas is. And now painting on this canvas means that I have a lot more freedom knowing what I can and what I cannot do, knowing that the end painting will have some sort of sense. And I think that would benefit most of you greatly, to understand what your canvas is and start controlling its direction, because life is a lot more beautiful that way. Greatness comes from humble beginnings, from grunt work when you're the least important person in the room, until you change that with the results. I apologize. Let me read that again. That sometimes happens. You see, recording things live. Greatness comes from humble beginnings, from grunt work. It's when you're the least important person in the room until you change that with the results. So again, you could build a reputation on what you're going to do, or you could just do it, and that will become your reputation. And best of all, when you go through hard work, and when you go through action, and when you go through the hate comments, and when you go through all the things that are degrading you in ways, when you're the least important person in the room, once you get those results, it's not just that it's an accomplishment that feels very good. It's rather the knowledge that you can do it again. You see, this is the fundamental difference. If I put effort into something, creating a YouTube channel, starting a podcast, starting an online business, there's a very high chance it's going to fail. But if my expectations are low, and if I've put in the effort, and if I've learned as much as I possibly could on the journey, by disconnecting my ego, if one of my ventures fails, what I have is knowledge on how to start another one. But if you're a go-getter and your vision is that you're just going to succeed and you're just going to accomplish and you're just going to be the most successful person in the world, when that doesn't happen, you may very well feel like my friend did when he was losing that game of chess. And that type of feeling can very quickly become a cyclical one, and you're not going to crawl out of that pit. It's going to become anxious, depressive, desperate, desolate. Humble beginnings are a very easy way to do the grunt work. Because we only seem to hear about the passion of successful people, we forget that failures shared the same trait. Right? Everybody has gone through the failures, and so you'd be very well adjusted to the world, especially before I mentioned the gimmick of getting rich quick. Look, if you're going to observe people who've made a lot of money very quickly, you'd best ask yourself the question, how many of them have failed? I would actually rather take advantage and experience and knowledge from somebody who's failed a lot, rather than the one who seemingly is always successful, right? It's not because the guy who is successful is somehow biased. It's just that the person who's failed, and this goes back to the mastery, right? Who is a master? A master has failed more times the apprentice ever even tried. Goes back to the very first quote I read today. Pain strengthens, failure strengthens. The knowledge that we learn from people failing is far more valuable than the knowledge that we get from people succeeding. And so you'd be best to surround yourself also sometimes with stories of failure. And I always search for stories of failure in the people that I talk to, because I can learn a lot more from that. And it tells me a lot about their ego. To be or to do, which way will you go? I'm not going to answer that one. I'm going to let you fiddle that through your head on your own. This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. I have a friend that I visited recently, and he has this giant calendar of weeks. It's all the weeks of your life. And what he does is every time he just crosses one of those weeks out, right? You've probably seen them. These are, you could probably buy it on Amazon or whatnot, but it shows you your life in weeks. And it's scary. Because you look at it and, I think he's 21 years old-ish. And you look at that calendar and it's already like, 1/4 of it is entirely filled out, colored. And it's a shocking one to see. but that's the reality. Another thing that we recently did is my family had to buy a new clock, right? Now, usually what clocks have is they have a ticking effect, so that the minute mark will sort of tick along. Now, the clock that I bought has a beautiful cat in it. What I didn't know is that because I bought a quiet clock, I hate clocks that go tick, 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 tick. It frustrates the living crap out of me. So I bought a clock that's silent. And what happens is the minute clock doesn't tick, it just runs. And when you look at it, 1 minute goes by insanely quickly. It's way different from just the classic ticking. With the classic ticking, it feels like a minute is a long time. But when it just rolls, when it just spins, you start to realize just how quickly our lives end. Now, I didn't want to make all of you anxious by saying that, but the reality is that time is a very valuable commodity, and we are wasting it. We're very much wasting it, right? This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. And our final quote, mere gossip anticipates real talk, and to express what is still in thought weakens the action by forestalling it. What does this mean? If you don't fully understand what you've just heard, it's you have thinking, then you have talking about it, and then you have the action of doing it. And this is the difference. So let me say this on the example of something I'm actually currently working on. So right at this very moment, I'm writing an ebook on how to learn English. Okay? I'm in the middle of this. So if I was to say I'm going to write an ebook, that's talking about the future. That's me saying that sometime in the future, over the next, 50 years that I will live, I'm going to write an ebook. I'm not specifying the time. I'm just saying I'm going to do this. And just by saying it, I feel a certain amount of weight roll off my shoulders because it's a pleasurable thing to say. I'm gossiping and I'm anticipating something will be done, something will happen, right? I'm going to write an ebook and it's going to be successful and everybody's going to love it. But seeing that I'm in the present time, I am writing it. It will take me another couple of days to finish it. I will have to proofread it. I will have to test if it actually works. There's a lot more work that I see still has to be done. Perhaps there's certain things I've not even yet considered. And by the time it actually is finished, by the time it actually does make its first sale, by the time it does actually make its first review or first critique, that's a very, very long time. Many, many minutes have passed. And so mere gossip anticipates real talk, right? Thinking about doing something anticipates the fact that you're actually going to have to go and do that thing that you're saying that you're going to do. And when things are still in our thinking process, this goes back to why I'm writing down these quotes, is because I read a book and in the moment, I remember everything I've read. There's maybe 20, 25 different stories in this book, different generals and Super Bowls and teaching and this and that. And when I'm reading the book, I remember all of them. I could recite them, frankly. But now that it's been a year, I actually have no idea what was even in this book. Hell, on the very top of this book, it says, reread it each year. It's that important. Now, it's not just that it's that important, it's that we forget. That's why putting things down and turning the gossip and the anticipation and the thoughts into action and actually doing it will allow you not to forestall the process of doing that which you actually want to do. This is why when it comes to productivity, when it comes to a better life, a happier life, a healthier life, you're better off just doing it, right? I love wearing Nikes, by the way. And it's partially also because of their slogan. Just do it. Like, what's really holding you back? Think about that. If there's anything that I want you to take from today's episode, it has nothing to do with ego. Absolutely nothing to do with ego. I do recommend this book. I think every person in this world would be better off by reading it. But The message I want to give you today is the message of action, is the message of understanding that your mind is your biggest enemy. And if you're sitting there thinking, do I have an ego problem? I don't think I have an ego problem. I'd be willing to put my entire body into fire by knowing that most definitely you have an ego problem. The louder you are and the more ignorant that your youre is, the more likely it is that you do have a problem with your ego. And I say that politely because all of us have an ego problem. I think even after reading this book, even after healing myself, changing myself, and working on myself for many, many, many years, it's an ever-ending process. It's sweeping that floor every minute of every day. And that's something that I want you to take away from today, is do the action, accept pain, learn how to love it, right? And if you want to learn a little bit more about pain, I do welcome you to listen to the last episode if you haven't yet, because religion has a lot to do with pain. It has a lot to do with forestalling anticipation by living in reality. And I think if you can conquer your ego, you can conquer your mind. And if you're still doubtful, and if you're still one of those people who think, I definitely don't have an ego problem, then what I want you to do is to find the best person that you know in chess and lose against them. And you'll thank me for it later. But until next time, take care and safe flying.